I've had so many people talk to me about the Menendez brothers, asking me to react to their testimonial in the Netflix documentary. So today I'm going to actually talk you through that documentary, not from a point of if it's truthful or not, but more about the fact of what trauma does to someone.
Is one of the most sensational criminal cases in the country, Lyle and Eric Menendez.
You can hear just how upset he is in that initial call. Someone's killed my parents. You don't know how trauma is going to impact you. The shock, the surprise. He seems pretty calm, but again, everyone deals with trauma in a different way.
90210 is one of the most exclusive zip codes in the world.
Maybe the safest place in America.
Find these isolated pockets of society. It all looks lovely on the outside, but inside there's always a sense of, feeling stuck, feeling isolated, feeling frustrated, and that frustration does eventually bleed out somewhere. That's why so many times we hear these stories of, A-list celebrities breaking down, drug abuse, breaking up, because on the outside it looks like they've got the perfect life, but on the inside there's a lot going on. People have to adhere to that perfection, and the things going on underneath are never reported, because people get scared that they're going to be ostracized. They're not going to live up to that sense of expectation.
On the other hand, this is Beverly Hills. And the idea that the sons at 21 and 18 could have been so responsible for such incredible acts of violence, you have a tension here. Could this really have been possible? Why? What's the motive?
And you have to think about how important it is to consider one's upbringing. Okay, they've got loads of money. Great. They've got a big house, fantastic. But you think about abuse, you think about trauma, you think about that expectation that you're living in a great neighborhood, go to a great school, got all the money, nothing bad could happen. It stops you from being able to voice your opinion, telling a teacher, telling friends of any abuse or trauma that you've been through. It's important to wrap your head around that even though on the surface it looks great, it stunts you from being able to be honest and truthful with who you really are.
I didn't really have normal coping mechanisms from childhood. I was comfortable with keeping secrets. But this was different than that. We were just in like a fog of emotion.
There was a memorial service at the Princeton University Chapel. The most poignant moment was when Lyle read a letter from his father. It said, "I believe that both you and Eric can make a difference. I believe that you will. I encourage you not to select the easy road."
Again, there's so much expectation on their shoulders. It feels like a pressure cooker ready to pop. And it's a lovely thing to have your parents think highly of you and ask you to push yourself and to achieve greatness. It feels like they feel rather hollow or shallow or numb to this. And obviously there's a great atrocities happen. They've lost their parents, but there's no sense of remorse for their actions. It feels like there's a side of them that's switched off from really caring about their parents, from that sense of responsibility to make sure that everyone around them is okay. And I wonder what caused that to happen. What is it that underpins their feelings surrounding the whole incident?
Porsche Cabrera, Jeep Wrangler, 3 Rolexes, ding, ching, 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 spending money.
Eric dropped plans to enter UCLA and hired a $50,000 a year tennis coach to help him turn pro.
Lyle bought a Porsche, expensive clothes, and a restaurant near the family's former home in Princeton, New Jersey.
There's 2 points to this. The first, are they trying to use their money to distance themselves from the pain of their parents' death and the murder? Are they trying to say, okay, I'm going to buy all this stuff so that at least I feel good in that moment? The other side is, have they been so restricted their whole lives of not being able to be honest with themselves, free to be the person they want to be? They've gone, okay, I'm going to go and spend all this money doing all the things I've always dreamt of doing. But you can see how when someone passes, that response of freedom is there. Either freedom from the pain of the murder of my parents, or freedom from them being so over the top and so controlling that I get to be the person I've always wanted to be.
I could not imagine telling my family that I had done this. Telling my grandmother. And I certainly wasn't going to be explaining why. I didn't want to destroy my father's reputation after we were responsible for his death.
Again, their father's reputation. Why is that so important for them in their lives when they've got their own life to lead? And they could go to prison for the rest of their lives or even suffer their death penalty, I assume. And yet everything's still going back to their parents being the sense of authority and having to be perfect for them.
Jose took off his belt. Someone was going to get beaten. You didn't know who, and you didn't know why. He reveled in his sadism. In 1986, Kitty Menendez discovered that her husband had been having an affair for approximately 8 years. She was leaving suicide notes for her sons. She was threatening to poison the family. A crazy woman got even crazier.
Just let's think about living in that environment. Their father was a genius in his field, but he was violent. He had expectations on his children. He cheated on their mother. You know, all this anger that must have built up and nowhere to go, because even in them being themselves, you're not doing it well enough. You got to do this better. You got to be a different person. I mean, again, this doesn't mean that you should kill your father, but you can start to understand the sort of pressure cooker that these kids were under. And they couldn't even run to their mother because their mother was talking about suicide. She was upset. She was volatile. She was desperate. This is what the defense attorney is looking to show, but you're starting to understand a picture about abuse, about what abuse can lead to.
Eric had gone to see a therapist named Dr. Jerome Lucille. And then after the murders, he had started to see him again.
At some point in the session, he asked me to take a walk with him. Eric told me things about his father and how his father was a great man.
Sorry, I know I keep on stopping this, but I don't know how many sessions this story is over, but I can already start to see there's some breaking of boundaries here, which is not right in terms of the therapy setting.
He said we killed our parents, but I asked him, you mean you killed your parents? He said yes.
I went to Dr. O'Seal because I really wanted to kill myself. I told him that I was responsible. His response was to have Lyle come in.
O'Seal goes into this really sick plan, and he wants to get their confessions on tape.
Dr. O'Seal is right into blackmail.
Could you
What?
describe his demeanor when he came into the office?
He was extremely upset, threatening, menacing.
My father chose this sleazy psychologist because it was the only psychologist who'd be willing to waive confidentiality.
Exactly.
So the son couldn't actually confide in the doctor.
Control.
And did you tell?
How could the patient possibly feel safe and secure knowing that the person that's abusing him is going to know what he has said in these sessions? Again, it's starting to build a picture about how controlling the father was. But, like, how could the psychologist even think that was a good idea? Unless, again, there's an element of, or a fear of hurting himself or someone else. Then, of course, break confidentiality, especially with a minor. But everything had to be told to the father. That's never going to work in terms of giving your patient the respect, the resource, and the space that they need to work through anything.
In the course of searching the brothers' cells, the sheriff's deputies found a 17-page letter in Eric's cell that Lyle had written to Eric. And at the end of the letter, Lyle had written in big letters, "Destroy this after you read it."
Lyle wrote me this emotional letter when I was in the county jail. Lyle couldn't express what he did in that letter in person. It was easier for him to put it on paper.
By writing it down, it gives us a sense of separation. If we're saying something, we have to feel it, we have to think it, and it's almost like we have to go back and see it in our imagination too. And it's too much for people to really hold on to, so we find it easier to write things down in order to admit to what we've done. It's a lovely tool that I use in my therapy sessions because it helps people to connect with different parts of themselves which they might feel ashamed of, embarrassed over. Please destroy as well. Once it's given to that person, you entrust them with that, and it's a shame that his brother couldn't abide by that letter and destroy it, not for the sake of the case, but more so for the sense of trust and that relationship with his brother. And it feels like the brothers only had each other to be honest with. And it's so sad, isn't it, that they had to lose their childlike innocence.
My impression initially was that they were two rich kids that just knocked off their parents for the money. But my experience told me there's got to be more to this case.
When I first met Dr. Vickery, I saw him as another Dr.
How's he meant to trust him?
I didn't know who to trust, and I had my brother telling me, don't trust any of them. I would much rather lose the murder trial than talk about our past and what had happened.
Something you can see is that he doesn't feel able to be himself at all. It feels like he's being led from person to person, and he doesn't know who to be or how to act. And you can just see how sad the brother is, not being able to just be himself and be truthful. And it feels like maybe he was led by others rather than following his own sense of right.
It was a mini Rorschach, I guess you could say, to have him draw it out. And I think it was helpful for him to be able to put it on paper.
Dr. Vickery revealed himself to be a kind, compassionate, gentle person, letting me sit in silence until I felt safe enough to speak.
Do you see the power of space, acceptance, embracing that, and allowing someone just to sit there in silence, just to muster up the courage to be honest with other people and indeed themselves? It's a lovely way of connecting. It's a horrible act, but again, these brothers, they've never had the space just to be themselves, just to feel what they wanted to feel. They always had to be thinking about what their father thought and the way the father thought that they should act, rather than just being able to be who they wanted to be. Again, I come back to escape so much in this video. It just feels like they wanted to escape.
And she just sort of threw the story on me.
Once you moved to Muncie, did sports become an important part of your life?
Well, they were everything to my dad, and that was my whole life.
Interesting, isn't it? Was sports important to you when you moved? Well, if sports were everything to my father. It's like, well, that doesn't answer the question, but you can see how they have to think about their father before they even think about what was important to them. Again, you think about safety, you think about a sense of self-esteem, you think about a sense of identity being linked so much to their father. And was that based on love? Maybe it was based on fear, on anger.
Ages of 6 and 8. Did your father have sexual contact with you?
Yes.
During the time between 6 and 8, when this was going on, did you do something to your brother?
Yes.
What did you do to your brother?
Even the judge can't believe it. And this is something really common when someone that's being abused ends up having to use that energy in some way and ends up abusing the next person. Because you'd think that if you're being abused, you'd be able to relate, you'd be able to understand, you'd be able to empathize, and you'd never do that thing to anyone else. Yet, you just see it over and over again, how people who have been abused throughout their lives end up being an abuser later in life. Sense of empowerment, that's what they're looking for. They've seen their father or they've seen their abuser abuse them, and they're going, how can I feel safe in the same way that they feel safe enough to do this to me, so I need to do it to the next person.
Mr. Menendez, during the summer of 1989, were you being sexually molested by your father?
Yes.
And when did that begin? How old were you?
I was 6 years old.
Thank you.
You know, this might be a good place to stop today because you can see how this is getting worse and worse. I'm desperately rooting for them, but I know that they've committed a horrible act. But what other option do they have? I mean, they could have left, but what would they be left with? Would their story have ever been told? It feels like this act of violence was a cry for help, saying, please do something, save me. I've tried our mother. That's not worked. No one else will believe me because I'm a tennis star and I've got all the money and I've got the address and I've got this father who's seen as a god. Yet, where do they get to be seen? Who's going to believe them? Let me know what you think of this so far, because you know my heart bleeds as I watch this. I need to take a sec myself just to recompose myself, and I'll get to the second part of this next time. I look forward to seeing you then. Any questions or any thoughts that you have, leave them in the comments. Speak to you next time. Take care. Bye bye.